People say treat yourself like you need a reason, but McDonald's treats are perfect for every day. Like bold McCafe iced coffee. Get any size for $1.69. Or pick up any size sweet tea for $1. The largest served in an insulated cup that keeps your tea cold. Feeling a little extra something something? Try the classic bakery sweets like an apple fritter. With so many ways to treat yourself, you don't need an excuse. Just come back tomorrow. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal.
Today on The Grave Talks, Demonic Cleansing with Michelle Belanger.
I'm happy, but I don't like happy songs. I'm splendid, but I don't want to sing along.
From a very young age, Michelle Belanger was in touch with her awareness of the other side. She knew there was much more to the story of life, even if the answers weren't immediately clear. From early encounters with spirits to sensing energy that others dismissed, Michelle's fascination and experiences increased. Michelle would eventually become one of the most informed and well-studied individuals on the topic of demons and the occult in the world. Today, we dive in to her world and discuss the life and the work of Michelle Belanger and demonic cleansing on The Grave Talks.
For me, absolutely, the journey began in childhood. I was raised in a family where psychic experiences were not unusual, and I was encouraged to talk about what happened and what I was perceiving. But we also had a strong background in academia and scholarship, so I was also encouraged to study as much as I could about people who'd come before and world traditions that talked about these things, to question it, not merely to say, ooh, I saw a ghost and sort of swallow that wholesale is absolutely the truth. As I grew up, I was an early reader and an avid reader, and all of my various journeys. I also went to the coolest public school system that you can imagine in Ohio in the 70s and early 80s. Which is to say that one of the programs they offered when I was in 4th and 5th grade were these Saturday enrichment programs where you got to take more school if you were really good at school. Mm-hmm. And one of the teacher's father-in-laws, he worked with and was a member of the Society for Psychical Research in the UK. And when he came over and visited, he taught parapsychology as one of those pickup courses for our school system. So I got to learn parapsychology from a member of the Society for Psychical Research as a 10 and 11-year-old.
Wow.
Right?
It's not your typical after-school activity. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, like they also offered like early computing and wargaming with miniatures and dissection and lots of other stuff. But like that one obviously like stuck with me. And, when I talk about it, you think about where we're at right now, that would never happen. Mm-hmm. That would never happen these days. Yeah. But that set me up for, again, being curious and not just an experiencer, but somebody who studied it. I went on to college. I was a National Merit Scholar, one of two in my school, full ride scholarships, yada, yada, yada. And in college, ultimately, I started off in psychology, but finally got my undergrad and as well as my graduate stuff in comparative religious studies with a concentration in the psychology of religion.
Okay. Take me back into your childhood. Obviously, you were very versed into the study of this. It wasn't just, well, Grandma's got some ghost stories or anything like that. It's very much, here's the history, here's the facts surrounding it, here's some stories, here's some accounts. It's the whole, the whole enchilada of everything that is surrounding you and your mind as it's developing, as you're growing. What was your first experience personally with something that you would classify or one would classify as being paranormal or supernatural, beyond studying and learning about this stuff, but more so a personal experience that made you go, oh, wow, what was that?
For most of my life, the one that I believe was the earliest ghost encounter that had happened at the local library. I was 4 years old. And I know I'd had open heart surgery twice as a kid. So like my final heart surgery kind of like makes this great like mental map landmark. So I know it was before that final surgery. So I am somewhere around the age of 4 and not quite 4.5. The local library was a former residence that had been transformed into a library, and they had started doing that in 1975. Now, unbeknownst to tiny me at the time, as soon as they started making the changes to the library necessary to turn it into a library, they started to have paranormal phenomena, like you do when you start changing things. And the main ghost that most people started to see was someone that they referred to as the Blue Lady. And this becomes important later.
Okay.
So I'm 4.5, and I'm there to look at books. I'm an early reader, and my mom knows the librarian. So my mom gets sidetracked and is talking to the librarian. They're still doing construction, and there's a section that is taped off with little caution tape. And I am told that under no uncertain terms am I supposed to go up the stairs under the caution tape. So, of course, the instant mom's back is turned, that's exactly where I go, because that's the kind of kid I was. I needed to know why.
Sure.
I end up in, only one of the doors was something that I could open, and I go into a room up there. And it was, to 4-year-old me, incredibly boring, because it was mostly empty. There was like a tarp, probably like some sawhorses or a ladder and stuff. Like, people had been painting up there. And other than that, there was pretty much nothing except for this woman who was standing at the window. And she didn't acknowledge me at first. She was just sort of staring out the window like she was, I don't know, waiting for someone, looking for someone. If I'd known the word at the time, I would have said that she looked melancholy.
Okay.
She had this dress, and this is what really caught my attention and had me standing and staring for a little while, because it had all these tiny buttons all the way up the back to kind of a high, tight collar, and these sleeves that started out poofy on the shoulders, and then they got really tight toward her forearms. And again, all these tiny little buttons all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And to my perception, the dress was white with little blue flowers embroidered on it. And, 4-year-old me is trying to figure out how she buttons all the buttons. Like,
sure.
It's a beautiful dress, and how? Like, seriously, how? All these buttons. And as I'm puzzling this out, my mom realizes that I'm not downstairs anymore. So she hollers for me. And the woman has kind of looked in my direction and looked back to the window. So, in retrospect, now I know that there's an intelligent haunting there. I duck out of the door enough to kind of yell down the hall that, I'm coming and I'm just around the corner. And then I look back in their room and the woman isn't there anymore. With 4-year-old logic, I have decided that since I am standing in the only door that is visible to this room, that she knows a hiding spot that I cannot see,
Mm-hmm.
and that she shouldn't be in there either. So clearly she's just hiding, because we're both in trouble for being up here where we're not supposed to be.
Sure.
So I go off and, go meet up with mom and, don't talk about anything about this. And the experience stuck with me. And it's important to understand, at that time, in that moment, I had no idea I had encountered a ghost. Under the age of I'd say 5 or 6, most of my encounters, they looked like people. I mistook them for people. I assumed that they were regular living people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was years later, as I grew up and started studying stuff in the area, I started to hear rumors that the library was haunted. And then I heard people talk about the lady in blue, and who they described was the person I'd seen. Flash forward to 98, and I wrote an article about the hauntings in my hometown, and started to do some real serious digging and learned that her name was Rebecca. And she had died at 28 as a quote-unquote spinster. She had been the sister of the local school teacher. She was from the 1800s. She was known for her needlepoint, her embroidery work. And she died from some wasting thing that was probably consumption or cancer, and they didn't really understand at the time what it was.
Something you die of an Oregon Trail.
Yeah, exactly. Very much. Maybe not dysentery.
Yeah. Scurvy.
And so she was the first, wow, I saw this at the same time that this was active, that everybody else was seeing this, that this was definitely something going on. Now, the first time that I was fully conscious that I am perceiving something paranormal was a few years after that, and that was the house I grew up in was also haunted. And it's funny how families that live in stuff like that just get used to it. So like the chandelier would occasionally do like a lazy 360. I'm not talking like swinging to the level of like Ghostbusters, but like enough that you would notice that the chandelier is moving.
Yeah.
And the cabinet doors would open and close, and the hurricane lamp in my room would turn on at very opportune times and turn itself off. And I started to like really figure out like this A is not normal, and B, I'm pretty sure we have a ghost. And of course I'd be like, hey, Graham, I think there's a ghost. She's like, oh, they always do that. It's okay. But if I saw it, if I was able to perceive the spirit behind it, then we'd have a conversation about it.
What was that like? What was the moment? I mean, I understand where you had the realization that the woman in the library was in fact a spirit. But what was the moment where you had realized, oh my gosh, I think I've been seeing spirits throughout my entire life? What was that point? Was there like a moment of clarity there where suddenly kind of all of that came together for those encounters beyond the library ghost?
It was really more a gradual, like I was wet, you know, I was a fish in the ocean, and slowly I became aware that not everybody else was swimming in water. Like not everybody else was covered in water. And I think a lot of that was, you know, going through school, talking with people. My grandmother would caution me because in addition to perceiving spirits, I had a lot of psychic experiences, dreams that would come true, perceptions of people. Actually, that was a bigger thing for me, especially as a young thing. Like it took me a while to really, I don't know, I guess make peace with the fact that I was in fact seeing spirits. Mm-hmm. It was a lot easier to confirm when I had a perception of a living person, that like if I picked up a thought or an emotion from them, because I could ask them if that was something that they were experiencing. So I came to an awareness that that was something that I could do and that I was doing. Even earlier than I was like, not only are ghosts real, but I see them, and I guess that's weird.
When you're coming to these realizations, and this is just kind of slowly becoming an understanding that this is part of you, this is part of life, this is how you are, this is who you are you sharing this with your family?
Yeah.
And what are they saying?
My mom, my aunts all had ghost stories of their own. Everybody had some sort of an experience. Different relatives had different levels to which they had studied or had accepted things. My great aunt Rita was special. She was she had studied to be a psychiatrist, and family things had come together and conspired so that she never completed that. So she was a social worker with a very strong psychology background. And I like to joke that she loved Sigmund Freud as much as she liked Jesus Christ. She is a very staunch Catholic and also a Freudian. And how those two things occupied her brain without having it explode, I don't know. She was like the one family member who didn't perceive things. And so she was a great counterpoint to my grandmother in conversations where we would have late at night, just sort of talking the philosophy of existence and, you know, what makes up the world and how do we judge these experiences. My grandmother very much would be willing to listen, ask counterpoint of like, for like a dream that came true. She would say, well, did you write it down first? Because anybody can be psychic after the fact. So if you have a dream or if you have something that you think might be one of those like premonitions, record it and do it in ink so you can't change it. And that's for two reasons. One, that keeps you honest so that you don't sort of like go back and try to like retroactively apply it to something. Mm-hmm. But also so it's in writing and you can look at it and you can go, wow, I really did foresee this. It helps you get a sense of what it feels like, because some dreams are just dreams and some dreams do show up with more information. Mm-hmm. But Aunt Rita would take the psychological approach. So really early on, I got to learn a lot about hallucinations and delusions and the Gestalt effect, where if you look at patterns that are just chaos long enough, I think we call it in paranormal community pareidolia, where your brain wants to make patterns out of things. And so she would caution me about seeing patterns where there weren't any and to always question it. And from this whole perspective of my grandmother, her sister, my mom, and the rest of the family, and my Uncle Ray, who was a huge UFO guy. So, most of us are all into the psychic experiences and ghostly experiences and stuff. And Uncle Ray, who was an Air Force man and had some connection to Project Blue Book, he had a fairly high security clearance in Vietnam, and was more from like the science and aviation aspect of these experiences, where he saw most of it was either alternate dimensions, interdimensional, ultra-dimensional things, or somehow tied to UFOs. So I kind of got like this grand education by being able to just sit down and have open conversations with family members who had different backgrounds, different beliefs, and were willing to talk about it. Even when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like these were conversations that were normal in my house.
Mm-hmm. It's one thing to have an interest or a passion for this area of study or whatever you want to call it. It's another where people have these abilities and these skill sets to really tap into this, whether it be psychic or empathic or whatever area it may be. Is that something, and this is very opinion-based, but is this something where one can learn an ability to do it better or to be more sensitive, if you will? Or in your opinion, is this something where it's just what you're born with? Some of us are born with really good eyesight and don't need glasses forever. Some of us have really good hearing and can pick up on certain frequencies that others can't. Is this something where you just are able to pick up on certain things that others can't because that's genetically who you are? That's the gifts you've been given.
This is a question that we would debate a lot when I was a kid. And I've come to the opinion that it's a lot like musical ability or artistic ability, where there is, a genetic component where people can be born with a predisposition for it. You may have perfect pitch, or you may be one of those few people who can see a wider range of color than others, and so you're really good at blending colors. Mm-hmm. But there's still skill. There's still a technical aspect of the ability that needs to be developed. And in the case of these abilities, objectivity, and like really understanding what the landscape inside your head looks like and feels like, so you can tell when something from outside of you is what you're picking up to and reacting to. So it's a combination. And I do think that the vast majority of people absolutely could hone these skills, could learn them. And I think that it's in the same way that sometimes people are, I need to have corrective lenses. And, without corrective lenses, I'm not driving a car because I can't see anything like 10 feet away from me. So I do think that there's a small percentage of the population who essentially have, myopia in their third eye. And, outside of corrective lenses, they're not going to be able to really make much headway. Mm-hmm. But I think that there are fewer of those than most people assume. I truly believe these abilities are just one other aspect of our human ability to interact with and perceive the world around us. And they're actually so natural that we very rarely think of them as psychic or unusual. Our brains, these big supercomputers we have between our ears, are taking all of the information that we perceive at all times. The 5 that we're used to, but our sense of space, the sense of somebody being in the room, but also these other subtler senses. And, we don't necessarily think consciously, I am now sensing the sound of the fluorescent lights above me in this room. We just process that kind of unconsciously, and it becomes part of our overall picture of the room. And I say that for most people, psychic perceptions are like the buzz of the fluorescents. You don't think about it consciously. You're processing it, and it goes into your overall picture of your day-to-day experience.
In your opinion, are there events in people's lives that can essentially make that fluorescent buzz that much louder? One of the things that we hear about quite often would be a near-death experience. And I guess I'll ask this to you because you had mentioned earlier about at a young age having 2 heart surgeries. Sometimes people will point to events like that where, you obviously made it through and you're here, but there's obviously times where that people do not, do that, or it gets very, very risky and not very good. And they almost, they just skid through and make it. And then somehow things have changed. And if you will, that fluorescent buzz has suddenly gotten much louder, and they're able to pick up on things that they were not able to as readily prior to an event like that, whether that be a surgery, whether that be a car accident or some sort of trauma. Do you think that is at play ever with people's ability to sense and communicate with another side?
I think any kind of initiatory experience, any kind of crisis can help to heighten these abilities. I know I can't rule it out in my case. Mm-hmm. I think that my early surgeries and my health as a child may have been one of the contributing factors to my family being so incredibly open to speaking to me about all of these things. Mm-hmm. There's clearly things that run in the family on both sides for my bloodline, but at the same time, I went into cardiac arrest when I was 6 months old, which is how they discovered I had a heart problem in the first place. Mm-hmm. I was not, my life expectancy was 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the particular surgery that I needed required a heart-lung machine, which in the early 70s, they didn't have anything under a certain size. So you had to be a certain weight. And it was kind of touch and go about whether or not would I get big enough and healthy enough to go on this and actually have the final surgery that would save my life, or would I be a statistic? Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, as you got older and you continued to round out your education on all of these topics, what was the first experiences that you had where you were kind of digging into this, either professionally or more so, out of curiosity in terms of investigating things in the world of the paranormal, beyond just reading about it or discussing things with family?
In high school, I became that person that everybody would come to with their experiences. Mm-hmm. To hear, when I pick something up, I think I get impressions. What does that mean? Now, I won't count high school as I'm officially investigating anything. I mean, at that point, I'm just lucky that I've got people who I can openly talk with about this stuff, and people who are willing to share their experiences. It was once I went off to college that I started to not just be the person that people came to for advice and input, but college was the first time somebody asked me to come and basically kick something out of their house. Mm-hmm. It had been a house that had been split up to a multiple family home, and there was just something creepy. And first they wanted to see, is there actually something in this house? And are the experiences we think that we're having, is this valid? Is this just, we don't like the color of the wallpaper and, what's going on? So that was probably my first investigation as such. And I went in, and it was mostly a psychic investigation of just check the space out, ask them some pointed questions about what the psychological factors would be that might have otherwise influenced their perception, so that they would be misinterpreting something that was normal, or I should say natural. Because I guess it's important to state the psychology background. As an investigator, I was never... Uncle Ray was the gadget guy. The gadgets never really spoke to me. Most of my investigative technique, when it's not strictly psychic, is from the psychological perspective, from profiling the families, assessing where are they in their lives and what contributing factors might lead them to mistake natural phenomenon for something paranormal. And college is where I kind of honed and started to really apply that technique.
In the first case there that you went in and did some research, did some investigating, was it something that you assisted in them essentially ridding the house of?
I did. It was weird. It was also where I learned we don't have enough names for these things.
Yeah.
You're watching Ghostbusters, and I grew up watching something like that. And you expect there to be like that big book of spirits that like you just flip through and it tells you like if X, Y, and Z are happening, then you've got a pixie or a bogey or whatever. And it's just not that simple. So what they were experiencing first was just a general feeling of unease in the house, and also the longer they spent in the home, the more agitated they got, the more fights they got into, the more depressed one of them got, and the angrier the other one got. And it had gone on for a while because these emotions were easy to kind of write off as we're under stress, we've got deadlines, we've got whatever. But they would notice that if they were out of the house for any length of time, it would go away. And then they would come home, and within an hour or so, it would start to build up. So they started to think that like it's something in the atmosphere of where they were living. And this thing, I don't know, I ended up calling it like a memory ghost, like a residue. I was kind of making up terms as I went along. These days, we would call it a residual haunting. And it was mostly just a lot of built up negative emotions. It wasn't exactly intelligent in any way, but it had almost taken on a life of its own, in the sense that it would keep perpetuating the same negative emotions that had built it in the first place. And so my psychic perception of this was like this weird sort of crawling sludge, mainly like in the crawl space that kind of like was down in the basement under the stairs. Mm-hmm. And I'm simultaneously like perceiving this and going, and am I making this up? Is this imagination? Like, this feels really weird that I'm like kind of doing this energy thing to clear this thing out, but it feels like I'm also having a fight with this thing. Okay, let's just go with it. So I don't know if it's obvious from talking, but the kind of person that I am, it was really hard for me to learn how to get out of my own head and how to let go and just organically experience. It's much more my nature to analyze and rationalize and question and doubt throughout the whole thing, no matter how powerful the experience is. So the most useful thing I got in my toolkit with that first investigation was learning, when you're having the experience, go with it, trust your gut, and do what instinctively feels right, and then analyze the pants off of it when you're done. But don't analyze it in the moment. Just let the experience happen and pay attention to what you're experiencing. Record it if you can, because there's sort of two points in your head, like two ways of experiencing it. One as the investigator and the analyzer and the person who determines like what actually just happened, and the person from a psychic perspective who is in it and experiencing it. That's where I learned how to navigate those two sides of my particular experience.
When you're in a situation like that, and it's something that is residual, and I think oftentimes when we hear the word residual, we're assuming this doesn't necessarily have any sort of intent or consciousness. It's just that energy. It's playing over and over. And this is kind of an interesting concept here. It is, I'll even go back to the annoying fluorescent light buzz. That light buzz, if it were a physical object, and it literally is a bad fluorescent light, it's just there. It doesn't have intent. It's not trying to annoy you, but it sure as hell would drive you nuts and probably eventually put you in a pretty foul mood if that's in your office every single day and there's nothing you can do to replace that bulb and it's always there. It is there. Are there ever situations, and maybe this was one of those situations, you tell me, where there is a residual negative energy? It's just there. It's been implanted there because of whatever events took place in the past, and now beyond our regular scientific understanding, that energy is hanging out and it's going to affect anybody around them. It's not trying to, but it's just there. How do you deal with something like that? Or is there a way to deal with something like that to rid a location of it? Because oftentimes we're jumping in with the assumption that, oh, it's the ghost of Aunt Bonnie, or it's the devil, or there's always, we try and assign these very humanistic properties to what the hell it is. Is it ever just that, where it's just there and we don't really have a true answer as to why it's there or who it is, because there maybe not be a true identity for it?
In my experience, the vast majority of hauntings are just residual energies. And in a lot of ways, we are assuming it must be an intelligence, because that's sort of what pop culture and media has taught us. And also, it's easier to want to reason with.
Sure.
You know, it's Aunt Betty, and she's why, the room feels crappy. And not just that Aunt Betty dying in the room left a stain in the space of all of her suffering. She's not there anymore. She has no control over it. It's just yuck that is soaked into the walls. And we because of our culture, we don't think to wipe that off the walls. We don't think to change out that buzzing fluorescent light bulb. Like, we just kind of toddle along going, I don't know why I'm so annoyed when I walk into this room all the time. I don't know why I always feel depressed when I walk into this room all the time. Huh? Oh, well, what's going on with that? So the second part of that question, what do you do about it? How do you deal with that kind of thing? I do believe that it is possible to clear out residual hauntings. And I think that they can be pretty negative. I think sometimes people will mistake them for, like, the house is possessed or cursed or whatever. The first step to doing it is literally just clean the space. Like, change something about it, break up the energy. It doesn't have to be saging the space. You don't have to go in with holy water and St. Benedict's medals, unless that's the way that you personally approach clearing a space. But the first thing is do something to change it, actually literally clean the space. That helps a little bit. Move the things that are in there, the objects that might be associated with that previous thing. If you're talking about an apartment that you just moved into and it's empty, it's the literal structure itself, like the soot that you don't even realize is on the walls if there's been a fire in a home. Mm-hmm. And then after that, do something to cleanse the energy. And I know that might sound woo-woo and new agey, but at the same time, like, it's what everybody's sort of trying to do when they go around saging a place.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be sage. Like, the concept behind sage in native culture is smoke. That sacred smoke is the closest thing bridging the space between physical reality and the spirit realm. And so you use the smoke to clear that as kind of a bridge to waft the intention of clearing that. Our European ancestors did similar stuff, but with frankincense and myrrh and benzoin and a number of other things that they would fume. They would fumigate the space, and that goes back to the Romans. The thing that you're using, be it sage or frankincense or whatever, is, in my opinion, less important than the purpose of you are changing the way the space feels on a profound level. It appeals strongly to your physical senses, but that also helps you bridge into doing something to the energy, to the spirit aspect of the home. And a lot of us need that bridge, need like a little bit of a help to be able to interact with that side, or at least to believe that we are impacting it. Because we affect it all the time unconsciously, but we have to use a tool to become conscious about our interaction, to like literally sweep out the yuck in the house.
So the act of cleansing a space is more so having something to do with what the personal meaning that cleansing agent has to the individual doing it than the actual agent itself. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That is absolutely my belief. I think we are the real source of any of that power. Like, we have a more significant impact on our environment than I think we ever give ourselves credit for. Most of the time we do it unconsciously. Some of that residual energy, the stuff that builds up, we're helping to contribute to that. Everybody probably has that one friend who has, hit a point of depression, and they pretty much like sit and wallow in their room. And whether it's a family member or a friend or an old roommate, like that room just starts to get a funk. And it's not just that they've been closed up in the room, and it's not just the dirty underwear in the corners or whatever, but like even if you physically clean the room, like it just has this funk that is all of the negativity, all the emotions, all of the bad associations this person has just been stewing in. That's where residual hauntings start, those emotions. It doesn't have to be a flashpoint of a brutal 5-person murder in a home. I mean, that absolutely leaves a mark. But over time, like the lengthy degradation of just somebody in a really bad mental state who's lived in the same space for 30 years, that is an incredibly powerful residual haunting. And, halfway through that, they're sitting in the haunting they've made themselves, perpetuating it the whole time.
That was the exact question I was going to ask, is essentially we, in some cases, are able to create our own hauntings through our own torment by what we allow ourselves to live in. That's a very interesting thing to look at, because I think that so often it's always assumed that it's an outside force that's coming in that's doing this, but we can essentially create that for ourselves. When it comes to things like this, and there's so many areas of the ghost family tree that I agree. There needs to be far more branches than we have. And the more that we do this, the more we dig into these topics. And we're probably damn near 5,000 episodes in on our other show of as far as how many ghost stories we've heard. I have far more questions than I have any sort of answer to. Because
same here.
It's just, and that's always funny when people say, "Are you an expert at this?" I'm well informed, but I'm not an expert, because I get more questions than anyone else, and I'm sure you can understand how that feels. When we have these things of spirits or ghosts that are beyond just an energy, maybe an energy that we created or someone else created, but when we're actually talking about a conscious entity of some sort, in your research and your investigations, and I'm going to make this simplistic just for the sake of our conversation, do you believe that there are spirits of those who were once living individuals that are wandering around out there, as well as things that never had lived on this earth that are also conscious?
I believe that there are spirits that were human. Something that has had a human existence and is still hanging around without its body, I'll usually call a ghost.
Okay.
Or disembodied. And there are definitely things that, not sure, well, we will probably debate until we're blue in the face, like what we want to call them, but they don't seem like they've ever been human, and where they came from, Actually, I'm going to say there's broadly, we'll start with two classes of non-human entities, things that seem like they're still from around here. I think that in the paranormal community, you may call them elementals, nature spirits, things like that. And then there are things that seem foreign in some way, seem alien, seem almost like interlopers, or travelers that have just sort of like gotten lost and they blip in and they blip out. Some of the theories on shadow people and like ultra-terrestrials fits in with this, where it doesn't seem like it's human or that it's ever been human. It doesn't feel like it's from around here. And sometimes its presence seems intentional, and sometimes it seems purely accidental, and as shocked as the people it's encountering to be present in this space. And from those three broad categories, an intelligent spirit that was once a human, an intelligent spirit that is from here but was never human, and an intelligent spirit that doesn't seem like it was ever from here but happens to be here right now. From those three broad categories, there's such a cascade of different things and interpretations and permutations. And, from culture to culture, we call them different things. One of my side interests is folklore, and it is absolutely connected to my paranormal research and my experiences, because how do you understand these things if you don't ask, what have other people said about them? What have other cultures experienced with them? Why are there little people in pretty much every culture and every mythology? Native American stories, and we think of like little people and fairies as an Irish thing, but they're everywhere, every folk tradition. So what that tells me is that humans are experiencing something. That something has some pretty distinct qualities, and depending on what time period you're from, what culture you're from, what your religious background is, you call it something different. And where we are right now here, we easily make the mistake that because something is called a pukwudgie over in Cape Cod and something is called a puka in Ireland, that you're talking about two different things because the words are different.
Mm-hmm. It's more so a matter of being lost in translation, and it's really the exact same thing that we're referring to.
Yeah, or at least very similar things.
Sure. Be sure to check out Michelle's book, Dictionary of Demons. The 10th anniversary edition is coming out, available wherever books are sold, as well as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and such online as well. That wraps up part one of our interview with Michelle Belanger. In part two, we dive much deeper into the topic of demonic cleansing and ask, does the act of cleansing a space have to involve the same ingredients for everyone? Are we able to stain our own environments with negative residual energy as a living person and, in essence, haunt ourselves while we're alive? Are people ever able to call up or risk bringing something into their life that has negative intent with or without knowing it? What are the origins of demons, and how are they able to affect our lives today? Are the souls of the dead able to possess the living without being demonic? Is there ever a way to truly kill a demon, or does it just simply transfer its existence into something else? That and much more in part two of our interview. To hear it, become a Gravekeeper. That's a supporter of our program at patreon.com/thegravetalks, or go to our website, thegravetalks.com, and follow the links. For only $5 a month, you'll have access to part two of this interview, as well as part two of all of our interviews, and you will be supporting this program and keeping it on the air. This is a show that could only exist with your support. So we greatly appreciate the $5 a month donation, and in exchange, you'll have access to hundreds of episodes in their entirety, as well as other extras throughout the year. Patreon.com/thegravetalks to support the program and get part two. Until next time, for The Grave Talks, I'm Tony Bruschi. Thanks for listening.
For the ones standing guard, for the eagle-eyed, for the knights in shining armor, and for all those who support them, we are Grainger, your experienced safety partner, offering supplies and solutions for every industry, committed to helping keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com/safety, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
When it comes to working at Geico, our best advocates are our employees, like Maxine. But since she is so focused on growing her career, we hired an actor to read her story.
At Geico, I love mentoring the new associates to help them make this a career and not just a job.
And with new opportunities and job stability, Geico has been helping people grow their careers for over 75 years. The only downside, she still hasn't met the gecko. Where are you, fella?
Ready to start your career, Virginia Beach? We're hiring claim sales and service agents. Apply online today at geico.job/Virginia Beach.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the name your price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool. Only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Can I pop a beer in here? Your cousin from Boston. Sam Adams Boston Lager is my go-to beer. Not too heavy, not too light. Oh boy. Oh no. Is that on the computer? Sam Adams Boston Lager. The Boston Beer Company, Boston, Massachusetts. Drink responsibly.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the name your price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool. Only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the name your price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool. Only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.